Thank you so much for being here, Assemblymember.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We've heard a lot tonight from providers, from people in the private sector. You come at things from a slightly different point of view. What do you see as the role of the policymaker and the state policymaker in women's health?
Well, because of today's environment, it's even more important than it ever was. But when I was elected in 2006, there were only 36 women out of a 150-member body. Now there are 53, which is better, but not the desired number. But, you know, before I and other women were elected, there was no one who concentrated on women's health, women's issues in general, because they were men and they have a different experience and different concerns. So I think states right now have massive obligation to protect women's health and women's rights.
Yeah. How has the conversation in the state legislature changed in the almost 20 years since you've been in office?
Well, when a colleague of mine was elected in 1980, there were no women's bathrooms.
Wow.
So she had to find her place to go. There are things we now discuss, and some of it is legislation that I've passed that was never touched before. For example, axing the tampon tax. Mm-hmm. So no one had thought of that. No one cared until you look at it from a woman's perspective. And so that's one of the many menstrual equity laws I passed. But we have different experiences, and so we prioritize things that men may not and do not.
Yeah, and was it hard to get your male colleagues to listen on these issues?
Well, I think a lot of them were just very embarrassed. It was about 2016. And initially, when I introduced the bill, I was told, well, we need that tax revenue for the general fund. I'm like, okay, it's the end of session. We're going to do this next session. I mean, why should women shoulder that burden? And so I did pass it, but I didn't have that many conversations with my male colleagues because they were shying away from it. I did mention blood and other things on the assembly floor, and their faces were, that was fun.
Yeah.
But now I think men see it as an advantage to look like they're supporting women's health. But the ideas don't come from them, even though they try. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it looks good on their campaign lit. I supported that.
Yeah.
And I really don't like that.
Yeah.
Because you really did nothing about it. But everyone can take their track. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you want to see from your male colleagues?
Well, they shouldn't be embarrassed. They also should realize that we know what we're talking about, and we propose bills. It is because it comes from a place of experience. It comes from a place of working with other women, working with advocacy groups that are concerned about women's issues and women's health. And don't try to grandstand.
Yeah. It's good advice for all of us in general. Getting a little more specific, New Yorkers are going to vote starting next week on an equal rights amendment that protects against unequal treatment based on reproductive health and autonomy, among other things. How is this different from what's already in place in New York, and why is it important, relevant to the future? Mm-hmm.
Well, it's Prop 1, which is on the other side of your ballot, and it enshrines in the New York State Constitution these equal protections. So while in New York State we have fabulous laws protecting choice, abortion, reproductive health care, the whole gamut are in law. But if the worst thing happens, it's not in our Constitution and laws can be overruled. So it's key that we maintain those protections in New York State. And the other side is trying to say, oh, it's about trans women playing sports, and it's really not about that. But, you know, people who don't care about women's issues will say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how have you seen the conversation change around abortion in New York State since the overturn of Roe v. Wade?
Well, New York State passed abortion rights 3 years before Roe v. Wade, so we've always been a proud champion of abortion and reproductive health care. We did put it way back then in the penal law. So some years ago in 2019, we changed it and added some protections, but took it out of the penal law, put it in the health law because that's where it should be. When Dobbs came down, you know, it was a grim day, but I and others put in legislation to address immediately some of the effects. So I passed 2 laws, one that protects medical providers from losing their license if they help women from out of state, and also protect their medical malpractice so that they can't be sued here in New York State for actions they take to help women from other states. We also did geofencing, which is what anti-choice groups would target women walking into clinics or hospitals with like a digital boundary into which they would send messages like, don't do it, adoption, etc. So we banned that. And also that warrants cannot be, they can be served, but they don't have to be obeyed when it comes to women's health data.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we have Prop 1 that's on the ballot. Is there anything else that you think New York State, that you'd like to see New York State do to protect women's reproductive rights?
Well, we do have good laws regarding IVF. I think we need, well, I've worked on and others on sexual assault, which is every day there's another horrible story that you hear. So that's very important. I have a bill called the TAMP Act, which is total access to menstrual products, so that everywhere you go, a museum, department store, there will be products, because it's a normal biological function. However, it's still considered shameful by some in society, and so we have to normalize that. I have a bill called the New York Privacy Act. So if you download an app to keep track of your period, that is not protected by HIPAA, which means that the company has access to it. Another state government could have access to it and see that you skipped your period for 2 months. When you come back to that state, like, wait, what happened? And the invasion of privacy depicted in a candidate's project, 2025, wants to keep track of abortions, reproductive health care. So we have to pass this bill into law that protects your personal health data. So it can't be sold, it can't be used for ads, it can't be used for anything unless you agree with it. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to pass more laws along that line as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Fortunately, we only have time for one more question, but I wanted to ask, you represent a district in New York City, but New York is a really interesting state in that it's very urban in parts, very rural in parts, and women in different parts of the state have different health needs. There are maternity care deserts in some places, rural areas. How do you balance that in your policymaking?
Well, you have to talk to everyone. So just because someone represents Buffalo, that's different from New York City, we all work together to address everyone's concerns. So sometimes there's no childcare available in rural parts of the state, so we take that into account. Just have a circle of women who are elected talking about their individual needs and the needs of their constituents. So it's a very inclusive process, and it's very empowering to see that we can get things done when we work together and when there are enough women represented in the legislature.
That is a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Assemblymember, for being here tonight.
Thank you.